You are looking at royalty right now because I am the queen of scraps. To the point where I think that when I sew from scratch, the items never turn out as good as they do when I then use up those scraps from sewing from scratch. And I don't really know why. Maybe it is because of the added texture to the item that I really appreciate. Maybe it's because it forces me to be a bit more creative. Ultimately, the process is very quickly and easily summarized into creating new fabric from scraps and then simply placing my pattern on there and cutting out my pieces as I normally would, just adding a couple of extra steps beforehand. So this is my assortment of scraps that I will be working with. For top number 1, we got some lovely whites, blues and green, and for top number 2, I actually only have 2 types of fabrics, some beigey pattern scraps and a muted sage green. For top number 1, I will be using these blue tones for the thread to fit into the color family and scheme of the fabrics. This process really is actually super simple and it's not technical at all. We literally just create new fabric, and I found that the easiest way to do this is by cutting the scraps into smaller pieces so we can play around with the textures and colors for the final design. The individual pieces we cut need to have something in common, which could be the length or the width or both. In my case, I just cut every single piece of scrap into about 7 cm wide strips, and I tried to make them as long as possible. All uneven edges I cut off because I want to achieve a geometric design. I'd say the cutting and arranging is the most time-consuming part, and after that it tends to be quite a quick make. I keep cutting every piece of scrap until I have exhausted the pieces and am left with multiple strips of my fabric scraps. I then like to lay out my scraps and see which sequence of colors looks best. So in the case of the green top, I'm basically trying to achieve a color gradient where I work my way into the darker colors, starting from white in the center. I am also mirroring the top from the center of the top, whereas for the green and beige top, I am just alternating between the 2 different fabrics. For those strips that are not long enough, I add 2 or 3 strips together, and therefore the vertical lines are the ones we need to sew as the first step. After that, we can move on to the horizontal lines. I attach every seam wrong sides together, first of all because all of the seams inside the top would be quite uncomfortable to wear, and I also just really like the exposed seam style. I sew all of this with my overlocker using a rolled hem, which makes the exposed seam look very intentional and part of the style. I personally prefer that to the normal overlocker stitch, which could make the garment look slightly unfinished. With every sheet of new fabric, I also of course make sure the measurements still align with my patterns and body as well as my vision. When I am very limited with the amount of fabric, I will prepare the fabric alongside the pattern to calculate how many strips I need widthwise to cut this specific piece. In some cases, that has also resulted in slight miscalculations, but sometimes it is also enough to simply attach one last smaller piece to the area that needs extra coverage instead of wasting fabric on areas that will be cut later on anyways. Once all my fabric sheets are finished, I will give them a quick press, which helps ease the thread into the fabric too. With my finished fabric sheets, I can then start my very normal sewing process of cutting my patterns. Of course, I need to pay much more attention to the placement of the pattern, making sure all of the intentional placements of colors and textures will eventually end up where I want them to be. Since we are very restricted with the fabric anyways though, that still tends to be a very quick and easy process. With the pattern pieces cut, I can then proceed with the generic assembly, which in my case was just closing the shoulder seams, attaching the sleeves, and closing the sleeve and side seams all in one go. These seams I of course also place on the outside, so sewing the wrong sides together. I was already obsessed with the green top at this stage, but originally I was going to trim the sleeves and bottom of the top to the same length once I assembled the top. However, this up and down shape that the strips organically have created with their different lengths was way too good to cut, so I left it as it is. That did, however, make it harder to finish the hems, as I can't really go in and out like that on an overlocker, so instead I sewed this on my sewing machine with a tight zigzag stitch. And here are the finished tops. These style of tops just are my favorite kind of thing to wear. It might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I love the texture and interest that the exposed seams and different fabrics provide. And it is also an extremely effective way to get rid of scraps. I also made a little surprise top in black, brown and taupe fabrics, which I didn't film the process of. All 3 tops have gotten a lot of wear already because they are so easy to just wear with any jeans and still look interesting. I'm also not done with this type of style yet. I'm currently contemplating to create similar tops again, but using different shapes or placements. So yeah, that is basically my favorite way to get rid of scraps, which is simply turning it into new fabric. Like I said, pretty simple process, but I do really love the outcome and I hope you do too. And that's already it for this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and other than that, thank you so much for watching.